Hello, and welcome to No Wrong Choices, a podcast about the adventures of life, where each episode features a dreamer who chased an idea or a vision, made it happen, or are on their way. Along with Tushar Saxena and Larry Shea, I'm Larry Samuels. If you've been enjoying the show, please be sure to follow us on your favorite podcasting platform so that you're alerted when a new episode is live, or say hello by visiting our website at NoWrongChoices.com, or check us out on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram by searching for No Wrong Choices. This episode features an entrepreneur who sold an idea that became an absolute winner. Dave Lagreca, the creator and host of the SiriusXM wrestling show and now brand, Busted Open. Now, Tushar, I know you have a long history with Dave, so you are undoubtedly the right person to lead us out today, so take it away.
I've known Dave for a long time, well before his days at Sirius. I've known him and his brother Don, for many, many years. I've known for more than 20 some odd years. I'll tell you what, his success with Busted Open is unbelievable because he's not the only person who ever thought of this idea over at Sirius to have a wrestling show. But what I am interested to try and find out and dig in with him a little bit is how did that finally push through? You know, at some point, someone finally said, you know what, we got to have a wrestling show here at Sirius. We got to have a wrestling show here at Sirius, and this is the guy to do it. At what point? And who was it that helped him push through and knock that final wall down and then turn Busted Open into what it is today?
I'm excited to have this conversation with Dave. He's one of the good guys in the business, right? Like, I know him.
Really good.
I knew him from Sirius days early, and just always a guy you could talk to and go to and, find out something or work out a problem that was happening professionally, and just one of the good guys in the business. And you love watching those good guys succeed and knock it out of the park, right? So this is a great example of a guy who really busted his ass and then had a dream come true just because he was willing to do it. And I'm excited to hear his story and how it really happened.
And he had so much success that his face is now on a T-shirt, which you can get somewhere. I don't know where. Anyway.
You can see it on TV.
You can see him on TV, et cetera, et cetera. So with no further ado, here is Dave Lagreca. Now joining No Wrong Choices is a man who pulled off the incredible feat of turning an idea and a passion into a highly successful media franchise. Please welcome the lead host and creator of the pro wrestling show Busted Open, heard on SiriusXM, Dave Lagreca. Dave, thank you so much for joining us today.
I appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
All right, Dave. So now you're a huge star. You've signed. You're signing contracts all over the place. If people put on WWE Raw, there are big heads of you all throughout these arenas. I gotta know, because I've known you for a long time. I've known you for a long, long time. You started out as a producer, back in the day, even before I knew you at Sirius. You started out as a producer doing sports shows. Did you ever see yourself going from the producer seat to this seat, and how did that journey happen?
I didn't actually. When I was producing, and I was producing at WFAN and NHL, and even when I started at Sirius, I had no aspirations of being on air. It was never something that I wanted to do. I actually enjoyed producing. I loved it. I got a thrill out of it, and I kind of just fell into this, believe it or not. Myself and Doug Mortman, who's a VP at Sirius, we were pushing for Steve Cohen, who was the VP of sports for Sirius, to do a wrestling show. And we didn't have any aspirations of actually hosting the show. We just thought it would be a good idea to have a pro wrestling show as part of our sports catalog. And it just so happens when the opportunity was given, it was also given to host it. And I actually fell into it that way. It was never something I really pushed to do.
When was that, Dave?
That Busted Open premiered. The first show was April of 2009, April 28th of 2009. And when you hear that date, it sounds kind of odd because it was actually after WrestleMania. You would figure that it would start before WrestleMania or immediately after WrestleMania, right. But that wasn't the case. Love SiriusXM, but hello.
Missed opportunity. But
but it started like, at the end of April in 2009 and it started out once a week for an hour. And then, obviously, as time went on, it expanded from there.
So full disclosure, we're colleagues, right? SiriusXM, right? We're,
absolutely.
Yeah, so I'd see you in the hall producing, doing your thing. I mean, you were always so professional, but I knew you loved wrestling. I knew you really wanted to do this. How many times did you pitch this? Like, you must have gone into Steve Cohen's office 100 times saying, this is what needs to happen. Here we go. Here's the pitch. And give us the pitch. How did you do this?
Well, that's where Doug comes in, because Steve Cohen seems to have problems with his hearing whenever I'm in his office.
Oh, geez.
And obviously he loses his efficiency for time management as well.
Should we send a copy of this particular episode to Steve's office the second it goes live?
And it also seems like whatever else is going on around him is much more important than whatever I have to say. So I pitched it many times, but Doug Morton was actually the one that agreed with me. And it was really him pushing it probably more than me that got Steve Cohen's attention, and then giving us the opportunity. But again, the opportunity was 1 hour once a week, and we weren't getting paid to do it. It was just like, here, if you want to do it, don't let it affect your day job and go to it. And that's what Doug and I did.
All right. So you and Mort are able to eventually get the show on the air. Now, were you surprised by the early success of the show? Or shall I say, I'll take it back, because obviously the show is now successful. Were you at all concerned whether or not the show would be successful? That's the real question I should ask.
No, I mean, it wasn't like one of those opportunities where it was like, all right, we have to knock it out of the park right out of the gate. This was kind of like, here you go. It's, at SiriusXM was a completely different animal back in 2009. You were able to get an opportunity like we were able to get much easier than now. Like, this show would probably never have seen the light of day now. At least the infancy model of it with Doug and I would probably be more like what it is now with a Hall of Famer, as a co-host.
Yeah.
But so we didn't really have any expectations at all. But probably like by the second or third week that we were doing the show, the phone lines blew up. And that's something that really, really surprised me. I wasn't prepared for it to be as successful as it was so early on.
Guys, does it sound familiar to you at all? Like, once a week radio show that you're not getting paid for, that they're giving you an opportunity.
The phone lines lighting up?
Yeah, well, we see you're the successful version of what we were back in the day, right? But it's lightning in a bottle, right? Like, you really, like, the phones lighting up like that. You caught lightning in a bottle, and they were starving for it. It turns out, Dave, right?
Well, I also think that, and I think the show that you guys did was definitely outside the box, and it was a combination of a lot of different things, and based around sports talk radio. I think a big reason why Busted Open was so successful was that there was no other wrestling show.
Yeah.
So like, if you're a wrestling fan and you're in your car listening to SiriusXM, the only outlet is Busted Open.
Right.
There's when it comes to NFL talk, sports talk, there's so many different outlets. It's very, very difficult to get a grip and to kind of be looked at differently than everybody else, because there's so many different options.
You definitely
at least
have a captive audience. Yeah.
Yeah. And also at that time, guys, in 2009, there wasn't the podcast like we have now.
Right.
I mean, our show started long before this influx of pro wrestling podcasts. So there wasn't a lot of outlets for wrestling fans to listen to other than Busted Open.
So, Dave, you got all those phone calls coming in the first couple of weeks. What happened then? Like, you had this revelation, like, holy cow, we've got something here. What were your next steps?
Well, then that's when you start saying, all right, this show is more than just 1 hour once a week. And then slowly we started to expand, but it was slow. And that's when you got to convince the executives that this is a viable show and that it needs to have a platform. And that was the most difficult thing to do. The want to do it, the passion to do it, that was never in question from Doug and I. It was really just getting the opportunity, and and because of the position that Doug had at the time at SiriusXM, which he still has, and then, what I was doing to the executives, that was much more important than this pro wrestling show. So it was trying to convince them that there's more here than what they're actually seeing. And if given more time and given a bigger platform, how we could have the opportunity to knock it out of the park.
All right. So during the early infancy stages of this show, did you at any point say to yourself, because I remember, I had discussions with your brother as well, and then obviously with you, and you still seem to be kind of reluctant at times to say, okay, I want to be an on-air personality. Even during the infancy stage here, were there still moments where you're saying to yourself, okay, let's get this show off the ground, and then I can go back to being, I want to be the best producer I can be?
Yeah, I mean, I never would have imagined that this show would have been, which it is now, 6 days a week, 3 hours a day. That wasn't even in my mindset. Like that I didn't even think that was even possible back then. I just wanted to, be able to have a bigger platform to talk pro wrestling. I never would have thought that, all right, one day I won't be on NFL radio anymore and that I won't be producing anymore and I'll be a full-time host. Like 2009, 10, 11, 12, that didn't even feel like that was even an option. But soon after that, that's when I was like, all right, this is something I know could be much bigger, and this is something that I know I could do on a full-time basis.
All right, I'm going to ask you 2 questions. They're going to be related and not related at the same time. One is, when did you finally say to yourself, I'm an on-air guy, and this is my show, and this is what I'm going to do? And then 2, obviously in the early stages when you and Mort are saying, you know what, we need to have a pro wrestling show here on Sirius, or just in general, we need to have a pro wrestling show. What was it initially that attracted you to say, you know what, I think this is something that I have a real passion for, the pro wrestling, pro wrestling world? Because I mean, you're not the only person who ever pitched a pro wrestling show over at Sirius. I'll even go, full disclosure myself. I had done that a couple of years prior to you doing that, and the same thing. It was thrown back in my face, and it was like, well, you guys are crazy. No one's ever going to listen, blah, blah, blah. I had a lot of other things going on at the time, so I kind of gave up on that, even though I should have pressed hard like you. So, you're not the only one who went to the door and then got it shut in your face, but, your obvious perseverance paid off in the end.
Yeah, and then Doug and I decided to, do some shows on the road. So we did a couple of post shows after WrestleMania at sports bars. And it was the one at WrestleMania 30 that was like, all right, this is ridiculous. Now this is something that needs to be, on a bigger platform. And this is where I now have to completely focus on this show, because we did the post show at WrestleMania 30 and we did it at a sports bar called Walk-Ons. And, we were hoping to get maybe 15, 20 people. And we had probably about between 150 and 200 people there.
Wow.
And that's when I was like, all right. And it was all like, people that were fans of the show.
Where's Walk-Ons?
So,
where was Walk-Ons?
It was, I would say in between the Superdome and Bourbon Street.
Oh, so it was in New Orleans. It was in New Orleans.
Yeah, it was in New Orleans. It was like in the industrial area of New Orleans.
Okay.
So, that's when I was like, all right, this is an animal here. This is much bigger than we ever thought. This is where we need to go all in. And that's more difficult than it sounds as well, because, Doug Morban at the time, and he's a VP with SiriusXM. Like, that's not as easy to be like, all right, Dave, I'm folding this and then I'm going all in on that. It's a very difficult situation. So I had a much easier position where what I was doing to be able to go all in, and that's when you got to make tough decisions as a host and as a team, who's all in and who's not. And at that point, that's when I was like, all right, I'm all in.
Right.
Okay. So before we get into that, I mean, I'm just listening to this, and it's remarkable, really. And I guess the question comes to me: if you didn't have that takeoff, that wow, this is wildly successful beyond our wildest dreams, would you have kept doing it for nothing?
Yes. I mean, listen, my life is completely different now with a family and a home and everything else. It's easy. It was much easier then than it is now.
Sure.
But yes, I mean, I would have definitely have done it for nothing. But there came a point where, and you guys realize this too, and hopefully people who are listening to the show need to realize you got to know your worth. So it's great that you got an opportunity to do something that you love. But when you know you have something successful and you know it's big, that's when you got to be like, all right, listen, you got to I need to be recognized here.
Right.
And
Absolutely.
and I think early on, I just loved the opportunity to be on the air. But then it was probably right after WrestleMania 30 where I realized, okay, this is something where, all right, you're getting something. You're getting content that people really love. So now I need to be recognized for that fact.
So, Dave, I was going to ask you a question about what all in means, and we'll get to that in a second. But I think, let's sort of dig into that worth. Like, how did you define that? Who did you look to for guidance to say, hey, we've got something here. How do I value this? How do I make sure I'm being treated appropriately?
Well, I mean, Doug Mortman, who was my partner and my brother early on, during the early stages of Busted Open, I think he recognized it, and he was kind of like, he blurred the lines of being an employee and being an executive, because he was kind of on that fence at that time, where now he's solely on the dark side. I kid, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
But like, no, then that's when you really that's when you really have to go to that next step where you're telling the people that are in charge that I know how successful this show is. I know how popular it is. I see the phone lines. Look at these live shows. Now you got to find people, a team, guys, that believe in it. And I was able to do that because we were on a channel called, at the time, it was called SiriusXM Rush, which is now SiriusXM Fight Nation. And there was Marissa Rivas and Andy King, who were a part of that channel, that believed in the show. So I knew I had people on my side that were decision makers.
Yep.
And once you have that, then you can go to that next step.
So you kind of went from producer to creator to host. Now it seems like you're taking a step into being an executive producer. Did you also become a business person through this?
You have to be. You kind of have to adjust, and that comes in time. I definitely wasn't then, but I am now, because then you see other opportunities that you can use your popularity, and that took a long time for me to come to grips with. I never saw myself as a quote unquote personality or a viable personality.
Right.
I thought it was more about the show and the brand, but then you realize that you are that. And you have to. It takes a lot. It takes a lot of time to understand it, and that's not ego talking. I do it with all humility, but you do have to have a little bit of an ego and understand that.
Of course.
And it's something that I still experience. Like it's still surreal to me. Like I went to the AEW pay-per-view the weekend before last, Full Gear, and hundreds of people were coming up to me asking for pictures and autographs, and when you start seeing that type of thing happening, that's when you realize, all right, I could start branching out as well. And I think this brand and myself as an individual has been able to do that.
So this is a good time to ask this question then. When was the first time you saw your face on a poster or a t-shirt and it was staring back at you? Do you remember the moment where you're like, holy crap, look at this?
I do. We had our 10-year anniversary celebration in New York. And we had it at a sports bar, and we had 750 people in attendance, and which was a problem because the restaurant bar that we were in only fit 600.
Oh boy.
And the manager of the restaurant actually pulled me aside and was like, we gotta put a stop to it. So we actually had to turn people away. And because they were close to calling the fire marshal because there was so many people
Now
in
that's
the
a
building.
party, baby.
Yeah, and that's the first time I started seeing the Lagreca heads. And then that night, there was a New Japan Ring of Honor show at Madison Square Garden, and there were Lagreca heads in the audience, and I was like, holy shit, like.
Did you bring one home to show your wife and say, "Hey"?
No, I mean it was, but that's the thing. Those were people who actually made them. They weren't mine. They weren't. It wasn't like those people that were with those heads I knew. Those were people that were fans of the show that created those heads, and to see it at Madison Square Garden, that was like a wow moment. And then, then you start seeing it on TV.
I couldn't believe when I saw that for the first time on WWE on Monday Night Raw. I was like, what am I looking at here? I couldn't believe it. I couldn't believe it. I was like, is that Dave Lagreca's face?
And then it was kind of crazy at the pay-per-view I was just telling you about, Full Gear. There were 6 different, Lagreca heads in the audience, and then there's signs, and then you see people wearing your T-shirt and stuff like that. So it is surreal, and it's something I really appreciate because the fans of this show have been, so loyal and tremendous.
So when did the show then? Because I know that through the iterations of the show, obviously it started with you and Mort, and then I think your next couple of hosts were retired wrestlers, so to speak. Tommy Dreamer, Taz was another one. I'm trying to think of I think you had a couple of others in there as well. But when did the show finally begin to break through with the wrestling or with the wrestling entities themselves? WWE, NWA, that ilk.
Well, I mean, we've always had a pretty good relationship with the organizations, even early on, and going back to 2009. But it was in 2016 when Andy King and Marissa Rivas, called me into an office and said, "Hey, we're gonna go we're gonna go with 5 days a week for Busted Open, and you're going to." It was like a week before the Super Bowl. So they were like, "You're going to go to the Super Bowl, and that week on Radio Row for the Super Bowl, that's going to be your last week as a producer. When you come back that Monday, you're going to be full-time on Busted Open."
So and wait then a second, hold on. So from 2009 through 2016, you were doing both jobs?
Yes.
And how many days a week was it from, let's say, how many days a week was it from prior to 2016 being, or how many days a week was it at that point?
By that time, it was 3 days a week.
Oh my God, Dave, what a workload. Jesus.
Yeah. So I was still producing SiriusXM NFL radio in the morning, and then I would do Busted Open in the afternoon at that time.
Wow.
And then 2016 is when they gave the green light for it to go 5 days a week. And then that's when they told me, you're off NFL radio. This is your full-time gig.
That's incredible. When did you start to sort of cross over? Because I know you've been hosting things on streaming platforms, et cetera, et cetera. When did you bust out of radio into television?
That's just come with time. Like I've been given opportunities, like most recently the WWE having me host one of their kickoff shows for their NXT pay-per-view. That's just happened. Like the one thing about pro wrestling, it is a community and everybody seems to know each other and everybody understands what SiriusXM, what Busted Open's become. So that honestly has just come in time, just opportunity. And I've always looked at Busted Open as to me, it's not a SiriusXM show. To me, Busted Open is a brand, and Busted Open is many things. Busted Open is a SiriusXM show. Busted Open is a podcast. Busted Open is a social media platform. At one point we're on YouTube, but we don't do that as of right now, but that may change in the future. So there's a lot of different stages and platforms to Busted Open. And then that goes back to what you asked about before with me becoming a character or a personality. With that comes other opportunities, and it's coming. I'm very thankful for it.
So let's talk about the transition from radio to TV, because it's really coming out from behind the microphone. And I know not everybody has had an easy transition to come out from behind the microphone and to have video be part of the experience. Did you have to do a lot to prepare yourself? I mean, these are high energy performances. These are high energy events. How did you prepare yourself to come out from behind the microphone and get into that television world? What was that like?
Well, I was nervous about it. And the one piece of advice that I got was just be yourself. Just do. Everyone kept telling me the same thing. Just do you. Just be you. So once I realized that, it's cake, man. Because I just, when I do the show and obviously on the SXM app, there's video of the show, and there's also obviously video on social media every day. I am animated. The camera's on me all the time.
Sure.
So it's actually rare when it's something like this where it's just audio. Most of the time there is video. So I am animated and that's what I've been doing for quite some time now. So it's actually an easy transition.
So Dave, when you look back at your journey, you've mentioned, different people that we know along the way, and I don't want to give them credit before credit is owed or deserved, but who are some of those people who pulled you along, some of the bigger relationships that made a really big difference for you?
Well, I mean, I mentioned Marissa Rivas and Andy King. They were instrumental in getting this show on the right path.
Who are they with?
Andy King is no longer with SiriusXM, but right now Marissa Rivas is head of our podcasting department.
Got it.
At Sirius. Doug Mortman, who was my original co-host. I wouldn't have been able to do it without him. He was part of the foundation of this show. And then my co-host over time, you mentioned like Hall of Famers, Mark Henry, Bully Ray, Tommy Dreamer, now Mickey James and Thunder Rosa. These are big names within the industry. So I understand the impact that they have. And it's such a great dynamic on this show where I'm always going to be the fan, and then I have the actual performer that I do the show with. So those are the people that, obviously have helped this show. And then, and you guys know my brother Don, we grew up together. Don and I, when we were little kids, used to do pretend radio shows in our bedroom,
Wow.
And Don's gone on to great success, not on a national level like I am, he's local.
Second dig of the program.
I think that was intended for somebody.
Yeah, he's big in the tri-state area, but I'm national. No, but obviously being around Don and seeing what Don has been able to accomplish, and I kind of took a page from Don's book, because when you look at Don, one of the things that separated him from everybody else is Don was a hockey guy. He really he was hockey. So there wasn't a lot of people, especially in the tri-state area, that talked hockey. So he was able to find that niche, and it grew into something much bigger than that. And I think I've done the same thing with wrestling.
I'll admit too, is that in the early years of Sirius, when they started the hockey channel, your brother Don, a very good friend of mine as well, was one of the original hosts. Him and Jim Cerny, and I had the opportunity to board up that show. And much like you, I was doing my own producing duties and other duties during the day, but I would come in 2.5 hours early to work that show. And then I would work the hockey show, and then I have to do my regular job from like 6 till 2 in the morning. So it was just crazy. It was just crazy. So, but that was the early days of Sirius.
Yeah, and it's funny that you say that, because you did it because you're passionate about it. You saw something, and NHL Live, which is that show, that's
NHL
grown.
Live, that was it. I couldn't remember right.
Yeah, that's grown into like a huge TV program, and that started.
Yeah, I
obviously
think that predated. I think that predated the network, right?
Yes, it did.
Oh, so I mean, you can see the actual transition from hockey was wondering, like the NHL was wondering where would their where would their audience go, or would they be receptive to an all hockey format? Obviously they were, and then obviously it branched out into the next stage. So I mean, and you're right in saying that the early years of Sirius were a lot like the Wild West in some senses, where you could like do almost anything, and if it worked, it worked. If it didn't, it didn't. But it didn't really hurt anybody. And yeah, as the years have gone on, you're correct. Now that they've gotten a lot more successful, they are a lot more about the bottom line.
Yeah, and that just comes in time.
It comes with time. It comes with time.
Yeah, SiriusXM is huge now. When I first started there in 2004, nobody has even heard of Sirius.
Right.
Nobody knew what that was. It was a new concept, and now it's obviously, with the ever-changing world of radio, terrestrial radio is completely different than it was, and localized radio is completely different than it was, and SiriusXM is in every car, so it's completely different.
Okay, so you obviously found a niche and exploited it. And Don, your brother, as you said, he's the hockey guy, so he exploited that niche. Now, did you take a little bit of, I wouldn't say, did you take some of what he did and say, okay, I'm trying to find my own niche? And then, is that something transferable to others? Like, can you say to others, hey, look, if you're going to try and get a show, you got to try and find that perfect niche for yourself and then exploit that? Or are these kind of anomalous situations?
It's a great question because I don't know the answer, because at the time, like I said, when my brother was getting into the hockey, there wasn't a lot of people that talked hockey, especially in this area. Now
there still aren't, frankly. There still aren't.
Yeah, but like there's so many more outlets where people can listen to hockey talk. And it's the same thing with wrestling. I just feel like the you got to be able to build an audience. What's the best way for you to build an audience? Is it on podcasting? Is it on social media? Is it YouTube? Like, you got to find your own niche that you're comfortable with. And then once you find that, then you hope you put it out there and that people can relate to you and that people can relate to the product that you're putting out, and that you build an audience. And once you can build that audience, then you're fine, because then you could go anywhere, because then you know that you have that army of people that support you.
Okay, at the risk of losing flow, I want to kind of encapsulate your journey here, though, because I know there's a lot of people out there wondering, how did he get there, though? And we usually start at the beginning, and we didn't start at the very beginning. So I've heard you and your brother used to do radio shows, mock radio shows, right? So that's lighting a spark. Obviously, that's creating this dream and this fascination with radio. You somehow end up at SiriusXM producing NFL radio. And how does that happen? Did you have formal training? Did you go to school for that stuff? And then once you get to SiriusXM NFL radio, how does that production stuff propel you and prepare you to do what you're about to do with this amazing project?
Well, I mean, it started in school. Like I majored in broadcasting in high school and then again in college. So that's something I always wanted to do. And then I worked for WFAN as a producer. I started as an intern and then worked my way up from being an intern to a board operator to a producer. And then based on my work at FAN, then I got a job at ESPN. And then from there, I got a job with the NHL. And then from the NHL is when I got a job with SiriusXM. But they were all in production. It was all being a producer, a radio producer, producing sports talk radio shows.
When you say get a job, though, like, was that a relationship? Was that there was an open call, I saw something somewhere? How does it happen that you literally go from FAN one place to another? Because those are some big names, right? How did you get in the door in those places?
Well, first of all, I always say, make sure you get an education, because that's where it starts. I went to school for communications, and then from there was open internships, and there was an open internship at WFAN, and it was unpaid, and it was weeknights and weekends. So you have to make that sacrifice to know that, hey, any spare time that I have is going to be spent working and not getting paid, which I was completely fine with, because this is what I ultimately wanted to do. So it started with an internship. That was so vital, to be able to work in an industry and at a station that you grew up listening to. And now you have the opportunity as kind of like, all right, for the next 3 months, I'm going to show them what a good worker I am. And I was able to do that and get a job. And then once you're in, you're in. So this whole industry is word of mouth. So it's very, very important that you show everybody that you're around and everybody that you're working for that you're dedicated and that you're a hard worker. The last thing you want is anyone saying any negative thing about you, because that's going to hurt. It seems like this is a big circle, but it's really not. It's a very small community. So every opportunity that was given to me, I did it my absolute best. I mean, two of the things that we've talked about now that were so vital in my career was my internship at FAN, which I didn't get paid for. And as I said, for the first almost 7 years that I hosted Busted Open, I didn't get paid for it. So like, you have to be willing to sacrifice and get your name out there and to build your name. And that's how I was able to build a reputation that people knew that if they invested in me, they were going to get a hard worker. And that's how I was able to go from FAN to ESPN to the NHL. Because like you said, those are big name brands.
All right. So actually, I was going to say that just a second ago. It's like, you're right, is that while this is a big field in a lot of places and a lot of towns, it's a small community. Everybody speaks to everybody and everybody kind of knows everybody. And you're right. Your reputation follows you wherever you go. So you can never really shake off. If you're a jerk, people are going to know about it. If you're a great guy, people are going to know about it. So I agree with you 100%.
Yeah. And too, like us, so all of us here talking, we all know each other. We all work for each other. So
yeah.
if you found out, all right, well, this person was a producer at SiriusXM, let me call Dave and see
if he knows him. See if he knows him, right?
Yeah, see if he knows him. And I might say, he's a hard worker, but man, he's a pain in the butt. then you're probably going to be like, well, is it worth it? So like, it's very, very important that you keep your reputation intact and make sure that everybody knows that when your name is attached to something, they're getting the absolute best.
So Dave, have you now found yourself becoming more of a mentor than to those around you? Because obviously you are now a veteran over at Sirius. So there are going to be people coming now who look to you and say, oh my God, that's Dave Lagreca. Now, to the three of us, like, yeah, that's Dave Lagreca. We knew him when he was a producer, great guy. But, there you are, Dave Lagreca, host of Busted Open, Fatheads on TV, you're a real big personality. So how have you been able to try and I guess navigate that world of being a mentor and keeping your ego in check? Or have you been able to do that? Do you even want to do that?
Well, I mean, I'm always like, and it's a blessing and a curse because I'm Busted Open, and Paul Ehrlich and Gabby Laspisa are our producers on the show, and they do a great job. But I understand what they're going through. I know what they are going through because I was a producer, so I can help them and I can help mentor them because I know I've been there. I was doing it for 15 years of my life was being a producer. So that never goes away, and that kind of goes back to some of the people who helped me. Like an Iron Eagle or a Bruce Murray. Those are guys that at some point they were producing shows, they go back to that era. So I'm always going to do that, but even more so now in the community of pro wrestling, I get a lot of people that look to me like, all right, how did you do this? And I get a lot of people that may have a podcast and like, how can I take this show to the next level? And that's something I really, really enjoy. Funny, because yesterday I was in a phone conversation with somebody, Lars Fredrickson, who's the singer for Rancid, or he plays guitar for Rancid, and he has a pro wrestling podcast, which is awesome. And he called me and was like, all right, how do I get to how can I get this show to the next level? So
Look at that, my God.
I feel like you almost have an obligation to our community that when you do something, that you pass that knowledge on to other people, because I think it's important, because there is going to be that next generation. I'm 51 now. So, there are so many people that are 25, 30 years younger than me that are getting into this industry. So I feel like it's almost like my obligation to help them if they need it.
All right. So I do have one question. What was your one, oh my God, I can't believe I'm here moment thus far in your career? I think I know what it is, but I want to hear what you think it is.
Well, what's your guess of what you think it is?
Your roast when you got roasted by Ric Flair.
Well, I didn't get roasted by Ric Flair, but I did get roasted, and we had. And
So
it's
not
funny
that.
it's funny. It's
So
funny you
not
said
right?
that.
So never mind. I know.
Interview's
over, everybody.
But it's funny you said that, because the next day after my roast, I saw Ric Flair, and Ric Flair was like, "Why didn't they have me roast you?" So it's funny. It's actually funny that you said that, because he's my all-time favorite. But that is a good one. And the fact that this past April, there was a Dave Lagreca roast, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is like the first time where it's on me. Like it's not a Busted Open show. It's not Mark Henry or Tommy Dreamer getting roasted. I'm on the marquee. It's the Dave Lagreca roast. So I was like, oh my gosh, like I really hope that this is well attended, because if it isn't, then it's a reflection on me. And we had over 1,200 people.
Wow.
Yeah, it was at an amphitheater in Arlington, right next to where the Texas Rangers play. And it was pretty shocking. Even the people that were a part of the roast, they were like, oh my God, like I thought this was going to be like 300 or 400 people. And then it wound up being over 1,200. And
Jeez, thank you so much for giving us this time. You are like way too big time for this show.
and it was funny because like the manager of the amphitheater came up to me and was like, man, we have concerts. Like we have bands come here, like Foreigner, that don't draw.
You outdrew Foreigner. That's
as much as this. And I was like, wow, like it was pretty crazy. And Marissa Rivas put that together, and it was pretty awe-inspiring. And that was where it was like, wow, okay, this is something that I never would have dreamed it. And then for my roast, for the Dave Lagreca roast, there was over 1,200 fans in attendance.
Wow.
So that was definitely that moment that was like that was a wow moment for me.
Assuming Ric Flair wasn't one of the roasters, who were the roasters?
We had Lance Archer from AEW, Nick Aldis, who at that time was the NWA World Heavyweight Champion, Tasha Steelz of Impact Wrestling, and then we had my wife and my co-host, Mark Henry, Tommy Dreamer, Bully Ray, were all part of the roast. So it was pretty cool.
So who's the dream guest then? You have cachet now, right? You could get whoever you want, it seems like, with that kind of a turnout. Give me that one guest that you haven't been able to book yet that you're like, we got to get this person on the air.
You know what? That's a great question, because I've been lucky enough to pretty much interview everybody in the wrestling world, from Ric Flair to The Undertaker. So now it's kind of like when you get those guests from outside the wrestling world.
Sure. Yeah.
So like those are the type of guests that you're like, wow, and like I'm a huge Alice Cooper fan. So when Alice Cooper was a guest on the show, that was like a big deal to me, because
right.
Sure.
I never would have thought that. But also it's like when you find out that there are people that are fans of yours that you would never expect to have were fans of yours. And then those are the things. And she's no longer with us, but somebody who was such a great guest and somebody who became like a really good friend of mine before she passed away was Tawny Katane.
Yeah. Oh, really?
And,
Wow.
yeah,
The Tawny Katane?
Yeah, Tawny Katane.
No, the other one.
From Bachelor Party?
Exactly, from Bachelor Party, which is one of my all-time favorite movies. And and she became like almost like a character on our show. and we became good friends. And it's like moments like it's like, man, I was watching her when I was a kid.
Yeah.
White Snake video.
Yeah,
For
like,
sure.
I was-
Remember the
We
White
saw
Snake
that.
video?
Yeah, yeah. I was watching her maybe sometimes with just one hand, and
Oh.
R.I.P. Tony
no, because
Catane.
The other one was waving
Listen,
to your friends who were passing by.
I eat a lot. So I always had like a
Right.
sandwich in my right hand or whatever.
Right.
So, so I was always eating. So,
Very hungry man.
yeah, very, very hungry.
Very hungry as a younger man.
Very hungry.
As
Or
we all
thirsty.
were.
So maybe I had a nice glass of lemonade in my
I understand.
So,
I understand.
Yeah. So, but it's those moments that I really find like, those are special moments. And she was such a sweetheart, such a great person. And, and Ric Flair being able to, in my eyes, the greatest wrestler of all time, to be able to interview Ric Flair was like a dream come true.
So, Dave, what's next? We've talked about television, branching out a little bit. What's the broader vision, if there is one?
I kind of enjoy what I do. I want to see this show expand. I want to see this brand get bigger. And I just take every opportunity one day. I'm really like, you have your bucket list. Like I've completed my bucket list, but at the same time, I've done things that I never thought I would have been able to do. So I'm still like looking for that next opportunity. Like I don't take it lightly. So it's not like it's not like I don't have goals for myself. I do, but I kind of like leave myself open at this point where it's like whatever you want me to do, I'm up for the challenge. Like I really want to do more television. I'd love to expand to do more radio. And I love the brand of Busted Open and I love pro wrestling. So I'm not really looking to change worlds. I love the world that I'm in right now.
Who owns Busted Open? You were Sirius.
Sirius.
Okay. All right.
Because it's now at that point where it's like, I guess it's intellectual property.
Yeah.
Is that the right term?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
Yep.
right.
Yeah. So, but they don't own me. So, I have my own hot sauce. I have my own T-shirts. Busted Open has at podswag.com have their own merchandise, but I have my own personal merchandise on Pro Wrestling Tees. So, they own the brand, but and I'm completely fine with it because they gave us the platform. But
Sure.
but they don't own Dave Lagreca.
Was that hard to work out with them, or was that pretty easy? You just have your own stuff and they have their own stuff.
Yeah, it wasn't very difficult. There always going to be a certain person that may try to stop it, but I'm smart enough and I know my worth, and I have an agent that makes sure that I'm protected. And
how much you charge on Cameo, by the way?
$25.
$25. See, he branches out everywhere.
So, Dave, what an incredible story for people who may not know you prior to having, stepped into this episode. Where can everybody find you? What things should everybody know about?
Well, you can follow me on social media platforms at David Lagreca 1, the number 1, David Lagreca, the number 1. I'm available, Busted Open is Monday through Saturday, 9 a.m. to noon Eastern time on SiriusXM, channel 156. The Busted Open podcast, which has been a hit, that's available wherever you get your podcast, Busted Open Podcast. You can get Busted Open merchandise at podswag.com/Busted Open, or you could get Dave Lagreca merchandise on Pro Wrestling Tees. And also, as I mentioned before, I have my own hot sauce at LagrecasRage.com. It's a great hot sauce. I think you'll love it. Perfect gift for the holidays. And then, as you mentioned, I'm on Cameo.
And Cameo,
I'm
of course.
on Cameo as well.
Awesome.
I think we have to get Tushar a Dave Lagreca cameo for his birthday. I think that would be a nice thing for us to do.
I'm going to get myself a Dave Lagreca tee. And then we have to sign it.
Dave, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate it.
Good luck with everything.
Yep, you too.
What an incredible conversation, and what an inspiring guy who really was successful at not only having a vision and bringing it to life, but also he gave me an idea to get Tushar on Cameo. I think it can be done. Tushar, I think we have a chance to put you out there in a different way. Anyway, what an incredible story.
No one's paying $25 for my Cameo. It's not happening.
But they'll do it for Dave Lagreca's.
Correct.
What a great guy. I mean, you love to see the good guys win here, right? But he gave us so much in that interview about how hard he worked, how willing to work he was, willing to work for free. He said he would have done it for free. I mean, this is a true labor of love for him. You can feel it in everything that he talks about. But he just hit on so many wonderful things about how you get to successful places in life. The radio industry is a small industry, right? Your reputation is important and relationships matter. I love to hear all of those things laid out in front of us because these are the things that we preach on this show all the time. So when you see a good guy win because of those techniques, it's just beautiful because it reinforces everything that we're talking about here on this podcast.
And I'll say it again is that I am surprised by how and I don't want to come off like it's jealousy. It's not. It's just that the amount of success that the show has garnered, it's shocking. Like I expected Dave Lagreca to be successful. Like if he wanted to be a successful producer, he'd be a great producer. But what he has turned Busted Open into, it's really a franchise. He's turned it into a franchise and an extremely successful franchise. I'll say it again. The first time I saw his face on, WWE Monday Night Raw, I was like, am I really seeing Dave Lagreca's face? I mean, it's one of those surreal moments you have. It's like, I've known this guy forever and now he's here. I'm like, what planet am I on? Sometimes it doesn't even seem real. That's how shocking his success has been.
Yeah. And, I think it's funny. We often come up with titles for our podcast and the conversations around the interviews. And one of the things that I'm thinking about right now is dreams do happen. This is a guy who, with his brother, when he was younger at home, pretending that they had a radio show, rehearsing while watching wrestling, leading into a roast years later. Like, dreams really do, if you're lucky and you put yourself out there and you have the courage to try, they really do come true. And Dave Lagreca is living proof of that.
I guess my only regret with this interview is I've heard that wrestling's staged and I didn't get the opportunity to ask whether it was staged.
I'm glad. That would have been a wrong choice. That would have been the wrong choice.
I thought there were no wrong choices.
There is apparently one.
No, this is a great conversation, and he tells you the tools. He gave us the tools, right? Listen to this interview, and he can tell you how to let your passion become your profession. And it's all laid out for you, and it's beautiful to listen to, and it couldn't happen to a better guy. We love Dave Lagreca.
Absolutely. Just an incredible story, an incredible person. And, we want to thank him for joining this episode of No Wrong Choices. Be sure to look for Dave Lagreca on SiriusXM, TV, Cameo, and above all else, buy his barbecue sauce. We also thank you for joining this episode of No Wrong Choices. Please be sure to follow us on your favorite podcasting platform or join the conversation by visiting our website at NoWrongChoices.com and our Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter pages, which can be found by searching for No Wrong Choices. On behalf of Tushar Saxena and Larry Shea, I'm Larry Samuels, and we are the Fellas.